PJ Dennis Francis has sent a letter to member states informing the name of 3 youth representatives who will deliver remarks at the opening segment of the Summit of the Future on 22nd September. They are Ms. Monica Malith from the Republic of South Sudan, Mr. Ghanim Mohamed Al-Muftah from the State of Qatar, and Ms. Nidia Alicia Garcia from the United States of America. In the same correspondence, the PJ expressed that he had the honor to propose that the opening segment also features statements by the President of the Republic of Namibia, His Excellency Mr. Nangolo Mbumba, and the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, His Excellency Mr. Olaf Scholz, in lieu of the national statements from the plenary list of speakers. President Francis intends to put forth this proposal for consideration of member states tomorrow at the GA plenary meeting. And in order to accommodate all speakers at the summit, statements should be limited to 5 minutes for participating states and 3 minutes for all other representatives. The adoption of the outcome document Pact for the Future is scheduled to take place at the opening of the Summit of the Future high-level event at 9 a.m. on 22nd of September. The GA decided that explanations of vote would not be granted. And we are making the provisional program available for you for both days, as well as the concept notes for all 4 interactive dialogues. And you will also receive them in your email together with these notes as soon as we finish here. President Francis met yesterday afternoon with the PJ-elect Mr. Philemon Young in the President's office as part of the handover process. Mr. Francis issued a post on his X social media account reiterating his full cooperation and that of his team during the transition period. President Francis highlighted that his office is committed to a smooth handover and looks forward to continuing the important work of the General Assembly, ready to support the incoming GA President and his team as preparations for the next session and the Summit of the Future are underway. And tomorrow, the General Assembly will have a morning, or full morning, I should say, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., holding its 107th plenary meeting to consider several draft resolutions. Member states will discuss and take action on 8 documents with themes ranging from sports for development and peace, enhancing the participation of indigenous peoples' representatives in UN meetings, multilingualism, tackling sexual exploitation and abuse, to the institution of the World Rural Development Day, proposed to take place on each 6th of July. And for the full agenda, please go to the General Assembly website. And before we conclude, to colleagues who have asked about it, we hear from the Department of General Assembly and Conference Management, DGACM, that the speakers list for the Summit of the Future will be ready towards the end of next week. So we'll keep you posted. And this is everything we have for now. Do you have anything else here or on the screen? How are you today, Edie?
Fine, thank you, Monica. Was any reason given why there won't be explanations of votes after the vote on the pact for the Summit of the Future?
Not as such. The member states are being encouraged to, if they have the explanation of votes, to express them in a meeting on 7th of October. Of course, this is a very packed agenda with several speakers, and time is of the essence there. Anything else here or not on the screen? I don't see anyone, so I will say I'll see you tomorrow. And on Monday, we'll have our press conference with the PJ at 11 a.m. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.
Madame. Okay. Pour l'instant, we shall see. All right, good afternoon. I was about to say happy Friday, but we still have one more day to go, sorry. After we're done, we will be joined by our friends Maximo Torero, Chief Economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Arif Hussein, Chief Economist of the World Food Program. And they are bringing with them a third person, and that is Victor Arguello, the Director of Child Nutrition and Development at UNICEF. They will all brief you about the global report on Food Crises 2024. Our Secretary General is on his way back to New York. He was in China earlier today, where he spoke at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. He said that many African countries are mired in debt and struggling to invest in sustainable development. Many have no access to effective debt relief, scarce resources, and clearly insufficient concessional funding, he said, in a situation that is unsustainable and a recipe for social unrest. That is why, he said, we have proposed deep reforms to the outdated, ineffective, and unfair international financial system, and an SDG stimulus to provide developing countries with the liquidity they need while seeking medium and long-term solutions. Mr. Guterres added that the China-Africa partnership can drive renewable energy revolution and can be a catalyst for key transition on food system and digital connectivity. Before leaving Beijing, the Secretary General met with President Xi. The Secretary General recognized China's valuable contributions to the United Nations and congratulated President Xi on the organization of the 2024 Summit for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. He and President Xi discussed topics of mutual interest, including the Summit of the Future. The Secretary General expressed his readiness to strengthen cooperation with China in all three pillars of the United Nations work. Turning to Gaza, our colleague Sigrid Kaag, who you know is the Senior Humanitarian Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza, visited the Gaza Strip earlier today to see firsthand the polio vaccination efforts that are taking place as we speak. Ms. Kaag visited the training center at Khan Yunis, where the UNRWA has rebuilt a logistics base, and a Japanese health clinic where UNRWA is administering polio vaccinations. The polio vaccination campaign just began today in South Gaza. As we told you yesterday, the first phase in central Gaza had been completed, with 187,000 children under the age of 10 having been vaccinated, well over the target of 156,000. Meanwhile, in Gaza, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs say that despite the challenges we face, the UN and other humanitarian organizations continue to do everything possible to provide life-saving aids to Palestinians. Our humanitarian partners say that between 19 August and the end of the month, 450,000 cooked meals prepared in 130 kitchens were provided daily to families across the Strip. However, despite this progress, it bears repeating that the humanitarian situation in Gaza remains beyond catastrophic, and we still do not have all the conditions necessary to support people near the scale that they actually need. The cooked meals provided represent a 35% decrease compared to the 700,000 meals provided at more than 200 kitchens in July. This is in part attributed to the multiple evacuation orders that were issued by the Israeli security forces, with at least 70 kitchens forced to either suspend cooked meals provision or relocate. Similarly, our partners tell us that more than 1 million people did not receive any food rations in August in southern and central Gaza through humanitarian means. Partners lack sufficient food stocks to meet requirements for the second consecutive month and will only be able to provide one food parcel to families in central and southern Gaza during the September distribution cycle. Ongoing hostilities, insecurity, damaged roads, and the breakdown of law and order and access to limitations have resulted in critical shortages of aid, commodities to sustain operations, increasing the risk of spoilage, infestation of food and supplies due to the high temperatures. I wanted to also flag that Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini said today in a social media post that 11 months into the war, international media crews are still banned from entering Gaza to report on the humanitarian impact. Turning to the West Bank, our OCHA colleagues report that Israeli forces continue to utilize lethal warlike tactics, including airstrikes in Jenin, in Tubas, and Tulkarem. Today, this has resulted in additional fatalities and injuries, and more roads and infrastructures have been destroyed or damaged. Medical facilities have been virtually besieged for over a week now, with heavy restrictions imposed on the movement of ambulances and medical staff. OCHA also warns that it's deepening humanitarian needs of the people as well as insecurity and raises concerns over excessive use of force. Back here this morning in the Security Council, members heard from Abdeji Ebo, the Deputy High Representative for Humanitarian and Disarmament Affairs. He briefed the Council on the implementation of Resolution 2118, which was, as you all know, regards the elimination of chemical weapons program of the Syrian Arab Republic. He said that an assessment team will be deployed to Syria to conduct the 28th round of consultations in mid-September 2024 and called upon the Syrian government to cooperate with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Mr. Ibo also spoke about the results of the last round of consultations undertaken in May. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that yesterday an interagency convoy delivered 3 trucks of humanitarian assistance to a community in the Kherson region. There's still nearly 2,000 people living in that community, Berislav, including more than 70 children and 90 people with limited mobility. Despite constant shelling, they have not evacuated the area, which has no electricity, which has no gas, and which has no water, all due to damaged infrastructure. Our humanitarian colleagues noted that this was the 9th such convoy to reach frontline communities in Kherson this year. Aid workers delivered a portable power station, hygiene items, bedding, blankets, and warm clothing. We've also received reports today that nearly 30 civilian casualties caused by hostilities in the Donetsk region and in the Sumy region, homes, stores, agricultural assets, gas, and electricity infrastructure were reportedly damaged. The Ukrainian government tells us they've launched a mandatory evacuation of children and their caregivers from another 40 towns and villages around Donetsk region. Turning to the Central African Republic, in a joint press conference with the government, our peacekeeping mission highlighted significant developments in the country to restore or extend the state administrative and civil authority with support from UN peacekeepers. These efforts have led to the improvement in the day-to-day lives of people, including better access to health care, justice, and other essential items. Our head of the peacekeeping mission there, Valentin Rugua Biza, highlighted an example through its air transport system that the mission facilitated in recent weeks the deployment of 4 newly appointed governors, 9 prefects, a dozen sub-prefects to different parts of the CAR. They're working out of buildings constructed or rehabilitated by the UN peacekeeping mission, which also equipped to better deliver essential services to the civilian population. UN peacekeepers also repaired over 2,000 kilometers of roads, fixed or rebuilt 131 bridges, or rehabilitated, developed 37 airstrips in the last 2 years. This, as you can imagine, is helping with the movement of goods, the movements of people, as well as the deployment of national defense and security forces. Moving to Yemen, where there's been severe flooding and violent windstorms, which have compacted the well-known humanitarian crisis in that country and left thousands of internally displaced persons and host communities in even worse situation and in need of dire assistance across multiple areas, including in Sana'a, Ib, Taiz, and Marib regions. In response to this, the International Organization for Migration has teams on the ground working to deliver immediate relief to thousands of the impacted families. The IOM is targeting over 350,000 men, women, and children with shelter, non-food items, water, sanitation, hygiene intervention kits, and more. IOM has also launched a $13.3 million appeal for this work. The storms that have struck Yemen as it grapples with a cholera outbreak and increased food insecurity. With further severe weather expected in the coming weeks and funding constraints, IOM is urgently calling on the international community to support its appeal to continue providing aid to those who need it. Weather events are also impacting a lot of communities in South Sudan. Our peacekeeping mission is telling us that they continue to assist the government and the communities in the wake of severe flooding in South Sudan. For example, in Pibor, which is located near the border of Ethiopia, peacekeepers are constructing barriers to protect essential infrastructure like hospitals and government offices and warehouses, humanitarian warehouses. And recently, the force commander for the mission, General Subramanian, visited Greater Pibor and Akobo, and also closed where he engaged with local authorities and our fellow peacekeepers and others. And just to say on weather, the World Meteorological Organization says a vicious cycle of climate change, wildfires, and air pollution is having a spiraling negative impact on human health, ecosystem, and agriculture. This year's edition includes special focus on wildfires and also looks at global and regional concentration of particulate matter pollution that it has harmful effect on crops. The report states that wildfires over North America last year caused exceptionally high particulate matter emissions compared with the previous 20-year reference period. The report is online. And just to note that, as you know, every day in this room, we spend a lot of time talking about big picture issues relating to peace and security around the world. But today I want to take a moment to mention the tragic death of one individual, which illustrates a much bigger problem that is all too often ignored. Earlier today in Kenya, Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei, a 33-year-old Ugandan marathon runner, died in hospital. Her death comes days after she was reportedly set alight by her boyfriend. Every 11 minutes on average, a woman or a girl is killed by an intimate partner or a family member somewhere in the world. That's according to figures released by our colleagues at UN Women and the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. We, of course, think that the true number is much higher. So if this briefing lasts half an hour, on average, 3 women have become victims of femicide while we are talking. Today, we join the UN Population Fund and UN Women in strongly condemning her violent murder. Gender-based violence is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world and should be treated as such. As the Secretary General once said, we live in a male-dominated culture that leaves women vulnerable by denying them equality and dignity and rights. We all pay the price. Our societies are less peaceful, our economies less prosperous, and our world less just. But a different world is possible. And today is the International Day of Charity. Charity spreads the message of humanity, mainly in conflict situations, which is needed nowadays more than ever. And just a reminder that the date of 5 September was chosen to commemorate the anniversary of the passing away of Mother Teresa, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. Lastly, we will finish on a quiz because we have one more member state, and that member state is the 7th largest country in Africa. It gained its independence in 1975 from the home country of our current Secretary General. Angola. You guys are really, looks like Friday. We thank our friends in Luanda. We are now up to 130. Edie.
Thanks, Steph. A question on Sigrid Kaag. There seems to be some question about whether her reporting mandate or her own personal mandate is set to expire. Can you tell us what the Secretary General's view is, and does he expect her to stay in this post?
Well, the the resolution is clear as to the mandate. We will see what the Security Council decides. We will, of course, work with whatever the Council decides. But it's important to note also the importance of the work that Ms. Cog has done over the last months, really bringing coherence to the way that humanitarian aid arrives in Gaza in extremely challenging circumstances. And Sigrid will be here the 16th, that Monday, whatever, the 16th of September. And I know she's already will be speaking to you at that point. Amélie.
Thanks, Steph. I have a question on Haiti. It seems that there are discussions led by the US to transform the mandate of the MSS mission because of problem of lack of funding, and there are even discussion around possible proper UN peacekeeping operation. Can you tell us what discussion have been going on with the peacekeeping people here? And if I remember correctly, the Secretary General was not particularly in favor of a full-fledged UN mission. So what is his position about that?
I'm not aware or have not been made aware of any discussions that have been taking place here in this building with our peacekeeping colleagues on the issue. And I'm not sure of how much the Secretary General's thinking has evolved on this matter from what he said publicly. Signor Vacara.
Yes, because it's a follow-up. I had the same question I want to just had. Is there any communication between the U.S. government and the Secretary General, for example, for the visit of the Secretary of State today in Haiti? And then, is the Secretary General satisfied so far of what the mission of the Kenyan police has been accomplishing?
Well, I mean, it's not for the Secretary General to give a grade to the impact of the multinational force. The fact that it managed to deploy, led by Kenya with the support of many others, I think is a tremendous step forward. It's very helpful to the Haitian authorities as they try to lead a government of transition. The force could, of course, use more funding, and I would encourage you also the website, the funding website is now live and public for all of you to look at on a daily basis, should you be interested. As for the beginning of your question, I can check, but I have no doubt that our colleagues in the political office in Haiti have been in touch with the U.S. Authorities, but we can check if there was actually a meeting and if our special representative met with him. Yes, sir.
Hi, Steph. If the SG, I'm sure you've received this question a few times, but if the SG...
if you know I've received it a few times and I've answered it a few times, but...
If the SG is able to explain and distill what the Summit of the Future is all about that's happening in 3 weeks' time, and especially to people on the outside and why they should care, how would he best explain it?
I think we are living at a time where there is no greater need for highly functioning, just and fair international institutions because of the problems that we face today, whether it's climate, whether it's pandemics, no border. Not one country can deal with it by themselves. We need those institutions. We need those institutions also for the economic well-being of countries. They are not, the institutions that we have now came out of the Second World War. They are no longer fair. They're no longer just, or as just as they could be. And this is a chance for member states to come together and find a better way forward. That's as distilled as I'll ever get. Oui, madame.
Thank you, Steph. Yesterday, the Israeli Prime Minister said that Israel is seeking to take control of food distribution in Gaza. Has the UN been communicated of any plans?
No.
And how does the UN feel about that, about the feasibility of that?
Well, I mean, I think we've heard a lot of statements around that. I think that two things are critical. One is the UN and UNRWA are the backbone, the heart, the lungs, and the arms of humanitarian distribution of food, of health in Gaza currently. The Israeli government, as the occupying power in Gaza, has a responsibility to ensure us that we are able to do our work. We are in constant contact with Israeli counterparts, notably Kogat, on how to improve the system, and that's a big part of Sigrid Kaag's work as well. Okay. I don't see a question online. I will ask our guests to be plugged in, and my friend Fahan will take it from here. The guests on.
Hi, how are you?
Maximo, good. All right. Bear with us 2 seconds.
Thanks very much. We're very pleased to be joined by Maximo Torero, the chief economist at the Food and Agriculture Organization, Ado Hussein, the chief economist at the World Food Program, and Victor Aguayo, the director of child nutrition and development at UNICEF. And you see all of their faces on the screen right now. They are going to speak to you about the Global Report on Food Crises 2024. And I believe we'll start first with Maximo Torero. Please, you're on.
No, thank you very much. And what we are going to do today is to give you an overview of the key findings from the mid-year update of the Global Report on Food Crisis 2024. Today, we have released this mid-year update of the Global Report on Food Crisis 2024, which draws on data available as of end of August 2024 to illustrate the evolution of acute food insecurity since the end of last year. The latest analysis shows that acute food insecurity remains persistently high, is becoming more extreme in some places and is spreading to new areas driven by conflict, El Niño impacts, and economic downturns. While there are reductions in food insecurity in some contexts, new or worse situations arise in others. The number of people facing or projected to face catastrophic IPC Phase 5 more than doubled from 705,000 in 5 countries and territories in 2023 to 1.9 million in 4 countries or territories in 2024. This is the highest in the global food crisis reporting and is mostly driven by conflict in the Gaza Strip and the Sudan. Intensifying conflicts in these 2 cases and also El Niño induced drought and high domestic food prices drove an increase in the number of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity in 18 countries compared to 2023. 8 countries, Nigeria, the Sudan, Myanmar, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Chad, and Yemen, experienced increases of around 1 million or more people in high levels of acute food insecurity. Let me now look into country by country. In the case of Sudan, famine IPC 5 is ongoing in internally displaced persons south of Sam near the Fasher, North Darfur, and is expected to persist through October 2024. Many other areas throughout the Sudan are at risk of famine due to continued violence and limited humanitarian assistance. The conflict continues to drive a rapid deterioration of food security in the country, with around 26% more people estimated to face high levels of acute food insecurity during the June to September lean period compared to June 2023, reaching 25.6 million people classified in crisis or worse. This means IPC 3 or above. This includes about 755 and 300 people projected to face catastrophe phase, IPC 5, by September 2024, up from none in 2023. The conflict also had implications for food security in neighborhood countries such as Chad and South Sudan. In the case of the Gaza Strip in Palestine, remains the most severe food crisis in the history of the Global Report on Food Crisis, with almost 2.2 million people or residents still in urgent need for food and livelihood assistance between March and April 2024. The severity of the crisis has intensified with half of the population catastrophe phase 5 during this period, up from a quarter in December 2023, February 2024. Although this was projected to decrease to 22% of the population, around 495,000 people, in June, September 2024, and available evidence does not indicate famine IPC5, but still the risk of famine persists. Conflict insecurity also drove to a catastrophic phase 5 levels of acute food insecurity in South Sudan, 79,000 people in Jonglei and Unity states and among returnees from neighborhood Sudan. And in Menaka region of Mali, 2,600 people. The severity is in Burkina Faso, Haiti, and Somalia, where no populations were projected in this phase IPC5 as of August 2024. The population in emergency, IPC phase 4, requiring urgent action to save lives and livelihoods, more than double in Burundi and Eswatini, and increase in Lesotho and Malawi, mostly due to the impacts of El Niño, induced drought, conflict and insecurity, drove increases in Chad, Mali, Myanmar, and Sudan. The number of people in IPC phase 4 decreased in 19 countries, with the largest reduction observed in Afghanistan, followed by Kenya and the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the positive side, better harvests and stabilizing economies drove improvements in food security in 16 countries. This is Afghanistan, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guatemala, and Lebanon. All had at least 1 million fewer people facing high levels of acute food insecurity since the 2023 peak, but they all remain in food crisis situation. Let me stop there and pass the floor to Arif.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Hussein. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Massimo. Yeah, I think Massimo has pretty much covered all the data points. I would just like to emphasize some of the things which frankly he said. One is that numbers, yeah, they are stabilizing, but they are stabilizing at a very high level. And what we're also seeing is that like Massimo was saying, you've seen deterioration of food security situation in 18 countries, where in 8 of those countries, the deterioration is more than 1 million people, right? But at the same time, you have 16 countries where there is an improvement. And out of those 16 countries, 5 have a significant improvement of having more than 1 million people each. But at the same time, what we are seeing is that the depth of hunger is increasing. Meaning, today, compared to just last year, there are 2.5 times more people in IPC phase 5, meaning a catastrophic level of hunger. I think that's one point which is very significant. The other thing which I would like to emphasize is that our displacement in these countries, the countries covered by a global report on food crisis, those numbers are increasing. And right now in 2024, the estimate is 99 million people, just in the countries we covered by the global report on food crisis. And compare that to 90 million in 2023. So almost 10 million more people. And where is this? Mostly in Sudan and in Gaza. And in Gaza also, I mean, the population is not that big, but 9 out of 10 people have been displaced and multiple times. What we are saying in terms of action, what is needed, there are 2 things. One is access. What I mean by that is physical access to people in need, whether it is in Sudan or in Gaza. Safe access and sustained access. That's critical. The second thing is basically funding. Having enough money to provide assistance on a sustainable way till the time that it is needed. Now, if you have one, it is not enough. Meaning if you have access, that's not enough. And if you have only money, that is not enough. You need both. Because if you have access and no money, there's nothing to give. And if you have all the money but no access, still nothing to give. So what we are pushing for is to make sure that there is sustained access and sustained financing for us to be able to take care of these people, whether in Gaza, whether in Sudan, or elsewhere. The other thing which is very clear is more and more, I mean, we see on the funding side, there is fatigue. In general, there is fatigue. But the problem what we see is that we need the ability to address the root causes, whether it is war, whether it is climate. Because unless we address the root causes, we should not expect the needs to come down. Why would they come down? If I am suffering because of a war today and the war continues, why wouldn't I be suffering tomorrow as well? If I need help today, I'll probably need more help tomorrow. And this is what we are seeing. And this is where the depth in hunger is going up. Very last thing for before I give floor to Victor. We have information. For example, if you look at Sudan, IPC process, declaration of famine, 755,000 people. People are talking about North Darfur, Al-Fashir, Zamzam camp, places around that. But there are many, many more which are in similar circumstances, but we just don't have enough data. So in a way, even the Famine Review Committee said that the likelihood is that there are other places with similar situations as in Zamzam, but they cannot say that there is a famine there because there is no data there. So access, again, in terms of getting the information to what is happening with people over there is also very critical. I'll stop here. Thank you.
And now over to Victor Aguayo, the Director of Child Nutrition and Development at UNICEF. Thanks.
Thank you, Arif, and thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. I would like to say a few words, of course, about children and about child wasting. Child wasting is the most life-threatening form of malnutrition in children. We often refer to it as acute malnutrition. Wasting remains very high among children living in countries that are experiencing food crisis, the countries that we are talking about today. This is due to the inability of families to access and to afford, as Arif was reminding us, nutritious foods for their children. It also is due to a lack of access to health, nutrition, water, and sanitation services. Needless to say that these threats grow very fast in conflict situations, which also reduce humanitarian access to the most vulnerable children, the most vulnerable women, and the most vulnerable communities. So our global report we are referring to today highlights a concerning increase of child wasting at critical levels in 8 countries, namely Cameroon, Chad, Djibouti, Haiti, Sudan, Uganda, Syria, and Yemen. My colleagues from FAO and WFP have described the nutrition situation in Gaza is one of the most severe that we have ever seen, one of the most severe food and nutrition crises in history. And it is important to remember that nearly half of Gaza's population who are suffering from this devastation are children. I was in Gaza last week, and I saw how months of war on civilians and severe restrictions to humanitarian response have led to a complete collapse of the food, health, and protection systems, with catastrophic consequences for children's nutrition. The fact is that the diets of children in Gaza, the most vulnerable to severe malnutrition, are extremely poor. We estimate that over 90% of children are eating at best 2 types of food per day, day in, day out, for weeks or months, in the context of toxic, very severe toxic stress and lack of access to safe water and sanitation. And we estimate that well over 50,000 children suffer from acute malnutrition and need immediate treatment. They need treatment now. I met doctors and I met nurses and I met nutrition workers who are implementing the programs that we support. I walked through markets and neighborhoods, or what's left of markets and neighborhoods, and I listened to the struggles of mothers and fathers to feed their children. And there is no doubt in my mind that the risk of famine and a large-scale severe nutrition crisis in Gaza is real and is happening. There is only one way to prevent it. We need a ceasefire, and we need a ceasefire immediately. And with a ceasefire, we need sustained and large-scale humanitarian access to the entire Gaza Strip. And this ceasefire and unrestricted humanitarian response, only this will allow families to access food, including specialized nutrition care for young children, nutrition supplements for pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers, and health, water, and sanitation services for the entire population. In Sudan, over 25 million people are affected by food insecurity, and this includes 3.7 million children who are experiencing severe acute malnutrition. I should say acute malnutrition. And these numbers continue to rise due to mass displacement, limited humanitarian access, disrupted health and nutrition services, and of course the onset of the lean season. So UNICEF is calling for unrestricted and large-scale humanitarian response for the early prevention, detection, and treatment of acute malnutrition among the most vulnerable children, particularly children under 5 years of age, and the mother, whose lives are under threat due to these multiple escalating crises. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn over the floor to reporters for questions. And when you're asking, please specify which of the three speakers you're directing your question to. All right, Edie.
Thank you very much on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. A couple of questions. First, following up, aside from the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine and Sudan, are they the main drivers for these sharp increases? Or is climate also a major driver? And why don't you do that, and then I'll go ahead. Maybe Maximo?
No, yes, very quickly. As I mentioned, El Niño has had significant impacts in several countries in Africa, which has also increased the numbers. So, but the biggest numbers are coming from Gaza and Sudan. But clearly, what we are observing, for example, in Southern Africa, El Niño induced drought led to widespread harvest failure between 2023 and 2024, and significant deaths of livestock over large parts of Angola, Botswana, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And this is also affecting the lean season for November 2024. In West Africa and the Sahel, levels of acute food insecurity has also increased because of this. And Nigeria has the largest increase in the number of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity, also driven by inflation, food inflation, and is also followed by Chad. So it's climate, inflation, but the biggest impacts are in Gaza and Sudan, as it has been mentioned.
And does this, I know the study compares 2023, and is it part of 2024 or not or is it only 2022, 23? I'm not quite sure.
The data goes until August 2024. So it compares with the last report that was at the end of the year in December, and it compares up to August 2024, where we look at the updates in that sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the floor? Okay. Do we have any questions from our reporters online? If so, please. I don't see any hands raised, but if you do, please let me know. Okay. Okay. I see nothing. So. I would like once again to thank our guests, Maximo Torero, Arif Hussein, and Victor Gallo. Thank you all for your briefings, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.